Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's dive into the story of a young woman who's shaking up her new neighborhood just by living life on her own terms. Moving into a classier neighborhood and bringing down the property value. I'm a 25-year-old woman in engineering. I was very lucky to have a full-ride scholarship to school and land a great job when I graduated. I've been living a rather frugal life because I'd rather set myself up for the long-term future than blow my money now. My family was never that financially stable, so the things I value most are saving and investing for the future. So I can drive an old truck I fix up. I ride my bike a lot of places too. I'd rather have friends over for drinks and potlucks than go out to eat. And 6 months ago, I was able to buy a house. It's in a neighborhood just outside of a city in the Midwest. I wanted to be just slightly outside the city because the local taxes are a lot lower. My house is in a totally residential area with mostly families. Apparently the schools nearby are very good. It kind of sucks in some ways. It's not really diverse at all, and after having moved there, it seems like people look down at anyone who's too different. There's not much to do within walking distance. I bike to the city, but most people drive. So here's the conflict. A bunch of my neighbors have told me that I'm bringing property values down and things like that. I'll give a couple examples of stuff that people have said and why. I have an old truck and I fix it up myself. Used to always use parts from a junkyard or online shopping, but then I heard about a guy who wanted a broken down truck, same make and model and year as mine, towed away. I said I'd take it for free because I wanted to be able to use it for parts when something in my truck needs replaced. It saved me a lot of hassle having it right there. Just a month ago, someone rear-ended me and I was able to use the tailgate, back panel, and taillight assemblies to fix my truck. I keep the parts truck under a cover when I'm not working on my main truck. My next-door neighbor said that the neighborhood wanted me to get rid of the eyesore because of property values. I said I'd keep it covered, but I was using it. Next, I have a lot of friends who ride bikes or electric scooters to get around. When they come over, they lock their bikes and scooters up outside because they're in the habit of always locking up. Another of my neighbors said that all the bikes locked to the fence makes the area look trashy and criminal. Nobody locks up bikes. Plus, the bikes look cheap. Plus, they have rules in the area about no street parking overnight and limited street parking in the day to keep big parties out. But we're bypassing the intent of that rule by biking. I didn't even know this was a thing. All my friends just happen to rarely drive. I don't know what to say. I feel like they ought to stay in their lane. I don't want to start blowing money to keep up with the Joneses, but they seem mad I'm not fitting in. Not gardening and landscaping, getting a new Beamer, etc. It's your property and your business. This is probably an unpopular opinion, but screw them. They can keep their noses out of your business. And our second story. Entitled mom takes over our family camping trip. My family and I go every year on a camping trip a few towns over. There's always a big event going on when we go, so it's usually a big party environment. Because of this, my dad tries to invite family friends to go as well. This year, he invited his friend Tom and his wife Laura. We've had some bad experiences with Laura in the past, especially since she enjoys inviting people to gatherings she isn't supposed to. When we arrive at our campsites, Laura had also insisted on bringing her nephew. My mom remarked that she didn't know he was coming, and Laura simply shrugged and said she didn't want him to spend the weekend alone, which would be understandable, but he's a 22-year-old man with a pregnant girlfriend, so he most likely wouldn't have been alone. We didn't care much. He brought his own tent, and he was a nice guy, so it wasn't too intrusive for us. As we got settled in, Laura walked into our camper where I was sitting alone. She looked around and began to question me about it. Things like, must be nice to have this camper all to yourselves, and if your dad got rented camper, why are you guys making him sleep in a tent? First of all, we were allowing everyone to come in, hang out, and use the kitchen and the bathroom if they wanted. We didn't just allow people into the bedroom because that's where me and my mom kept our luggage. Second, my dad wanted to sleep in a tent. The bathrooms in the park are filthy and it can get incredibly hot, and I'm prone to fainting in high temperatures, so I need somewhere to stay cool. That's the only reason he rented the trailer for me and my mom. I explained this to her and she simply nodded and left. My mom later found her making a phone call to one of her friends stating that there was a fun camping party going on and her husband should come. Of course, this was without our permission. While we ate dinner, Laura happily announced to everyone that her daughter, Dee, would be coming to join us the next day. And you guessed it, we didn't tell her she could invite anyone. Side note, Laura's reasoning for inviting Dee was so she and my family could make up for her not having a graduation party. She didn't get to have it because Laura was insistent it must take place at our house, but it would be inconvenient for us, so we told her no. The next morning, we walked outside and we see Laura's son, TJ. At this point, my mom is super annoyed with Laura. That wasn't helped by Laura cooking food that we had brought and telling my mom she didn't know what she was doing, so she couldn't help her cook. These weren't small meals either. She spent all day cooking a huge meal on her own accord and then complaining that she hadn't gotten any help. Finally, nighttime rolled around and Laura told her kids that they would be driving home in the dark, so we would make them beds in the camper. Me and my mom were losing our minds at this point, but still we tried to remain civil. I pulled out the couch onto a bed, and my mom started trying to figure out how to turn the dining room table into a bed as well. Laura helped my mom lift the table up before stopping to look and see how it may turn into a bed while holding it up with one hand and leaving my bad-backed mother to bear the majority weight. I tried to help, but Laura was in the way and yelling at me that she had it. After a few minutes, Laura came to the conclusion that no, the dining table doesn't turn into a bed. Laura let go of the table and angrily pushed it back down while my mom was holding it. This is ridiculous. My daughter shouldn't have to sleep in her car. Next time, you need to have better accommodations. She also implied that because her son was so much bigger, we should give up our bed for him. We just said, no way. We didn't even know her kids were coming. It mostly stops there, but Laura is completely insane, so I'll most likely post about her again. Update. To everyone calling me and my mom pushovers, my dad is a narcissistic drunk who likes his friends and his appearance more than us. He really likes Laura and is referred to her as an angel to our family. If me and my mom had told her off, my dad wouldn't back us up, and 6 against 2 is a slippery slope. We didn't allow her back into the camper after the bed incident. The only reason we went was because we weren't going to let Laura take our family trip away from us. She ended up doing so, and we aren't doing anything that she's involved in anymore. Why are you guys enabling this person? The sleeping arrangements for her uninvited children aren't your problem. No is a complete sentence, as is stop, get out, and shut the F up. And our next story. Built a fence when my neighbors went away for the weekend. I used to put up fences for a living. My wife and I recently bought my aunt and uncle's old home. The house has a large back garden with narrow paths along the sides of the house, and this leads to the front garden that's about 1/3 the size of the back and is half grass and half paving stones. They have neighbors either side with the same setup. The house is number 85. There's no fence between 85 and 83. 83 has 3 kids under 10 years old. My back garden has a lot of space to run around, and as there's no fence and my cousins are similar ages to 83's kids, my aunt and uncle often let 83's kids come over and play with my cousins, and 83's kids have continued to use the garden after my aunt and uncle left. I have nothing against kids, nor does my wife, but we have plans for the back garden. These include putting up a shed, maybe a few flowers, and we're expecting a baby, so we want our kid to have space to play outside. I went out and measured the property lines a couple weeks ago, and the husband of 83 came out and asked what I was doing. I explained about the fence and said I would pay for it and put it up myself, told him about my former job doing exactly this, and asked when would be best for me to do it. He said not to do it at all. I asked why. He said they have a baby, and I can't be bashing about with hammers and the like. I said I'd try to keep it down, but I would like to do this. He then asked why I needed to because things were fine as is. I said it's nothing personal, but I'm putting up a shed. And I just don't want his kids coming onto my property and getting hurt. He then said I can't put up the shed for the same reason as the fence, and I could see we weren't getting anywhere and went back inside. Then Thursday night, I'm coming home from work and I see the dad loading bags into their car. Saturday morning and the car's still gone and has not been seen since Thursday. I figured they've gone away for the weekend, and as the issue with me putting up the fence was the noise for the baby, now would be the time to do it. I bought the fence materials that day. I used wooden posts and panels and gravel to hold it in place. Whole thing was done by Sunday lunch. The fence posts are 1.8 meters and half that's underground. These things aren't moving until the end of time. It's on my property and less than a meter tall, so I didn't need permission from council or 83. They got back on Monday night, and this morning I've woken up to knocking. The husband wants me to get rid of the fence, says it's an eyesore, and he's worried his kids will get injured on it. I tell him it's on my property and it's staying. He says he should have been consulted because it's surrounding his property, and his wife hates it and thinks it's really ugly. Legally, I'm in the clear. Morally, well, info. It's a picket fence made of a pale wood. It looks clean and polished on both sides, but my side's the one with visible building markers, e.g. there's a nail in my side of the fence. There's no such issue on his side, and I'm open to painting it. It's not like you're laying the groundwork for amazing neighborly relations, but the dude sounds like an entitled a-hole. You did, in fact, try to talk to him about it, and the only reasons he gave you were the sound coming from you putting the fence up. And seriously, putting up a fence doesn't make that much noise. And our last story. Nightmare tenant that thinks they own the house. Cast, landlord is LL, nightmare tenant is Sarah, tenant in basement suite, Paul. This started last year. LL was trying to get the Sarah out of their home as they were causing damage to the home. The hearings to get them out did not work and only allowed the Sarah to stay longer than LL wanted. As the months went on, damage was more than what was originally thought. For example, the closet doors were taken or removed, there were holes in the walls, the patio had to be repaired because of NT's dogs or Sarah putting up tarps, which collected moisture, damaging the wood. The main damage that was noticed by the LL was that Sarah installed a stripper pole, damaging the hardwood flooring. There was a constant back and forth with hearings to get Sarah out, both LL and Sarah fighting constantly. There were demands of compensation for unpaid bills. How is that the landlord's responsibility? Constant calls for emergency repairs, even though there were not really emergencies. Demands for discounts on rent, a portion of rent to be deducted from the total, and harassment from the Sarah via texts and emails. The Sarah also claimed that it was now her house since she paid LL's mortgage or rent for 3 or 4 years. Just FYI, it was not rent to own. Anyway, she claimed appliances were broken, there were leaks in the newly renovated shower, there was no heat, and wanted an expensive heater courtesy of the landlord, etc. It only got worse. The Sarah started harassing the Paul. It got to the point that Sarah and Paul got into an altercation or assault as the police were called, and they initially believed the Sarah claiming to be a victim. However, the charges that day were dismissed for no evidence. Sarah continued to the police on Paul for no reason. Sarah then began looking into Paul's windows, taking pictures for no reason also. It got to the point where the police stopped believing her and started to believe that Sarah was the real problem. Update. The LL did an inspection of the property after giving 24 hours notice, of course. Sarah invited her family to intimidate LL and SO. It was crazy. LL was called names, taunted, and yelled at by the Sarah and family. It seemed like it was all set up. The police weren't called, but LL was left shaken by it. LL was able to get more pictures of the damage. Update 2. Paul had another problem with Sarah. The Paul and Sarah share laundry suite, and Sarah tried to frame Paul as Sarah's door was open to make it seem like a trespassing violation. It was lucky for Paul that they called LL and the police to get this settled. It's really sketchy. Paul didn't get into trouble or anything, but the police are getting fed up with Sarah as the police have visited countless times by now. LL has theorized that Sarah wants Paul out of the home as well because Sarah thinks they own it and want the home to themselves. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.